Hi, welcome to the Black Pill. I'm starting to see stuff about Dune Part 2 and some releases of still photographs, and people are gushing over those. So I thought it would be a good time to drop my review of Dune Part 1 from 2021. How long ago was that now? 2 years? Anyway, here we go. Content warning, bagpipes, and spoilers. So I saw Dune at the theater. It was pretty packed. If you remember what 2021 was like, and we thought the theaters might just dry up and blow away. I mean, right now, I'm not sure. We don't still think they will, but it was a really packed house even at that time. Coincidentally, I had just had my third Moderna shot. um, Cinemark did away with their COVID era policy of reserving the seats between parties at this time, so I had someone next to me on either side. Uh, None of that is anything to do with anything really. So risk aside from the other day, me and the missus went, and really really glad we saw this on the giganto big movie screen. The movie is huge and deserves a huge screen and gigantic speakers. Dune has a reputation for being completely unfilmable. I'm sure everyone who's reviewed anything to do with Dune, books, other movies, whatever, has said this or something similar. But look, movies aren't books. Books aren't movies. Nobody ever properly adapted the story for the screen until right now. David Lynch's magnificent fuckery ripped off Jodorowsky's adaptation in all the worst ways. I loved slash hate it. It was the 80s, man. Kyle MacLachlan is the worst casting choice in history, and I will fight you. I will fight you on that. The Lynch thing tried to do way too much of the head hopping that happens in the novels. Uh, and that's the biggest thing that needs to be adapted. Screen audiences just don't have access to inner dialogue. So let's put away the 1984 movie for now. Just see this one. The casting and character adaptations were all solidly good. Oscar Isaac is absolutely competent as Duke Leto Atreides. He's played softer than the source material, maybe a nod to kind of some changing times and changing ideas about fatherhood. Young people might not relate so well to the cold, distant father that Herbert wrote about. That's probably okay. That's probably okay. Rebecca Ferguson, great as Lady Jessica. I mean, I routinely enjoy Rebecca Ferguson's work. She gets a lot more screen time than Oscar Isaac, almost as much as Tim Chalamet. This version of Jessica simpers and weeps. She's weak and maybe naive. The source material is at least some of this, and I'm hoping that she toughens up as her arc runs through the next movie or two. At this point in the story, though, she's really just an acolyte. She's a breeder, not yet a full reverend mother, full of poise and reserve. We shall see. And with Ferguson at the helm of this character, I look forward to seeing. I think that's going to be just fine. Tim Chalamet, just absolutely acceptable as Paul Atreides. He's at least younger looking than Kyle MacLachlan. He pulls off naive and headstrong. There's times when young Paul tries to stand up to bigger people using his bloodline and implied authority, or just his training as the ducal heir when the house has collapsed. Chalamet manages to make this tentative, a child getting the hang of the bicycle. He could grow on me. He could grow on me. Part of the challenge is that Paul Atreides is just not a super relatable character. He's cold, distant, self absorbed, power hungry. He has in mind some kind of abstract justice, but also revenge, and wants the best for humanity in the abstract, but rarely in the specific. I don't think Chalamet tries hard to make him likable, and that is, I mean, that is a risk. It's really true to the source material, and it's risky. I don't think I remember Tim Chalamet from anything before the Dune movie. Uh, I think he's good. I think he's most of my review is like solidly good stuff. I could take or leave Josh Brolin, honestly. Gurney's not a central character anyway. More of a legend. They seem to have dropped the baliset, the 9 string baliset, from this adaptation. Although there are bagpipes, Gurney doesn't play them. Um, Gurney's supposed to be the sort of warrior troubadour, always with a song or a poem or something, uh, and he does poetry. He does poetry in this, but it's just flat. It's stilted. It nobody in the scenes comments on it. You could have left it out. The story is he's this legendary warrior troubadour, but that it's not on the screen. And so if you're not going to like go whole hog for this, you could have just left it out. And his whole arc, so far in part one, his whole arc with the Lady Jessica, it just isn't there. Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho. Like, I was skeptical going in. I was skeptical, but man, he really shines. He really does shine. Like, he's a meathead. Jason Momoa is a bit of a meathead, man. But so is Duncan Idaho. So like it works. It works, man. Um, like, I wouldn't have written the dialogue the way that it appears here in the movie, but Momoa could not have read the lines that I would have written. It just seems so natural and real in a way that the other characters kind of aren't. He's a low caste fighter. He's perfect. In the novels, Duncan Idaho's kind of a sex pot. He has a natural musk that the ladies just can't resist and gets shoved into the role of spy. That whole byplay is gone, is just missing. They kept the sexy. They kept the sexy. It's all right. Also, Idaho gets a really heroic death, even more in your face on screen heroic than the source material. So yeah, I'm happy with all that. Beast Raban is just sort of in part one. He's just sort of there. Dave Bautista is just sort of him. He's thick, dull, brutal. Yeah, perfect. I mean, no attempt to overplay the role. There's not much to work with yet. Ready to see more, though, done with Beast Raban in part two. Stellan Skarsgård is predictably good as the good Baron Harkonnen. Like, fat suit and makeup to fill out the part without going like really overboard on the fat shaming. That's in the source material, that's in the Lynch adaptation. Um, I don't know why they left the fat part in at all. Honestly, it's not Herbert's finest moment. Um, Harkonnen doesn't need that. He is just as cold as Herbert's Leto here. None of the laughter, the joy in deviousness, none of the perversion. Maybe a little, but not on screen. We'll see what happens. The byplay with Piter de Vries is gone. They had to pick some characters to focus on, right? And Piter didn't make the cut. He barely has lines. So it's really just Harkonnen plotting out loud, explaining a few little points in the fewest possible words to Raban. A lot more is implied than is said. And Skarsgård is just so sinister in this role. It really works. It really works. A lot of other like secondary roles, Charlotte Rampling, it's just fine as Reverend Mother Mohame. Javier Bardem is my least favorite casting choice. He's not my Stilgar. I think Bardem is increasingly an absurd cartoon of himself, a real distraction. Like, there's one casting choice I agree with in the David Lynch adaptation, that's Stilgar. And there's one casting choice that I really disagree with in the what the hell year is this? Oh my god, 2021 adaptation, and that's that's Stilgar. It's Stilgar. Zendaya is Chani. I look forward to meeting that character more fully in the next film. Here, I mean, she's just an adolescent fantasy for Paul Atreides. I hope that she gets a lot more like screen time and development, and we'll see where that all goes. Leet Kynes has been gender swapped. Um, in the Dune universe, a patriarchal feudal society, it's come all the way back. All the big juicy roles in the source material, they're men. So they almost had to flip Leet Kynes. An academic rather than a lord in this case. They had to do that for actor equity, if nothing else. I support that change. Sharon Duncan Brewster fills the still suit boots just fine. She also gets a more heroic death than the source material. If you remember how Leet Kynes dies in the novels, this is better. This is better. Especially having, gender played with the role, and arguably race played. Like, um, race isn't really explicit in any of the source material, so you could really do what you want there, and no one has. I would think if Herbert had said this is a white person, uh, you still wouldn't have any real leg to stand on if you want to argue against diversity in film. But since race isn't really in the source material that I remember, I mean, whatever, it's fine. Um, it's good. So yeah, I liked that. I like that character. I like that portrayal. People of various races get to play parts in the movie. That's good. It needed it. This is modernity. Even if America weren't increasingly diverse, um, movies have to play now all over the world. So there's a little tendency for black characters to get murdered by white characters. I'll reflect on that more privately, I guess, because I don't know if it means anything yet. See what happens in part two, I suppose. And the Emperor's missing. He just, like, doesn't appear in this movie at all. Uh, it's weird. There must be some big reveal planned later. Like he's a twin of Paul's dad or something, or he's a woman. No idea. No idea. But they seem to have gone out of their way to conceal the emperor. Um, the script. Let's talk about the script. The dialogue for sure is smoothed out into more normal spoken vernacular English. I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have done that. But I also don't make money writing screenplays. So, it seems to have played well. Even film goers who had bad experiences with the novels and the 84 film seem to have liked this dialogue much better. Although we did lose the best line in all of the novels. Mood? Mood is a thing for cattle, or making love, or playing the balisette. Right? That's gone. We lost that. A lot of stuff had to go to fit even the first thematically similar part of the story into one longish film. So the script drills down on a few key characters. Others sort of machinate in the wings or have brief scenes or something. We get a lot of Paul and Jessica, a little of Paul and other characters, a little bit of Beast Raban and his uncle, with so much going on and so much need for concision and brevity. It's weird to introduce a herald of the change. I'm not sure that scene added anything, except, of course, for Benjamin Clementine's face. He might be the most singularly striking, beautiful man I ever saw. I thought everything else, though, it was tight. It was fitted. is necessary to the story. Well, except for the opening. Except for the opening. Beginnings are, as Virginia Madsen notes as Princess Irulan in the 1984 film, perilous times. As a retired novelist, I'm here to tell you the first chapter is the hardest, and the first paragraph of that chapter, the apex of hard. I mean, except for the back cover summary. But I'm retired now, so I don't have to. I don't have to think about that anymore. You can't make me. Oh my goodness. Um, the opening is Fremen. Was it Chani? When I wrote this, the film was almost 24 hours ago. I just don't remember and didn't remember. Talking about the history of oppression on Dune, the expectation that with the Harkonnens gone, she's waiting to meet their new oppressor. Man, that plays in modernity. It plays hard, baby. We are rightly self-conscious about oppression. We've gone historically through and historically enacted. Does this bit of story go here? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. There's little in the story to justify it. Stilgar mentions it in passing that maybe Leto could try to stay away from his villages. At the end, Harkonnen tells Beast Raban to kill all the Fremen. The Atreides want to use them as an army, and no one seems to see that that's oppression too. But there you have it. Otherwise, there's no grinding despair, no water pirates, no humiliating poverty. The wasteful wet gardens gone from the story. The Fremen barely figure in part one. It's prologue? It's a prologue. The trouble with prologues is they should usually just be chapter one. If you're writing a prologue that isn't about the main characters, the risk is that nobody cares. Some people, just the militant readers, skip the prologue completely. If it's good, the reader attaches to the characters in it, then loses interest because the novel isn't about those characters. So, I mean, here we have sort of the film equivalent, a virtue signal that gets dropped from the rest of the film. Totally forgettable because it just doesn't really go here. If they wanted to make a film about Fremen oppression, they could have done a much nicer, fuller job of it. The source material is there. It is there. This is like halfway through the Harry Potter series where Hermione kind of goes all in on the elf liberation front, house elf liberation front. And then that story just disappears at the end of that novel and never comes back. Just a dropped thread. And the movie's already so like big that I hope that I hope that part two justifies that opening. Um, Cinematography. So I sort of added a two and a two when the Green Knight came out. Oh, that was a good movie. This one movie house did that fantastic bullshit, and they also did Hereditary, and they also did Midsummer. So stuff like flipped over cameras and long looks at scenes in which nothing is happening and gigantic noise, um, adding drama to those totally still set pieces, blaring horns and stuff. These films just, they amazed me. I doubt I understood them, but they totally blew me away. They were at least fresh. Dune borrows a lot of this. Not necessarily the upside down landscapes. There's one. The guild transport is dumping Harkonnen landers, and they disgorge and then float up above the mothership. Then the camera pans up, and we see Dune above the guild ship from this perspective. So the landers are really falling up, falling down, rising down. Anyway, but the noise. This movie is gigantically loud. The soundtrack seems natural. It's unobtrusive. For an example of an intrusive soundtrack, see the second Star Wars trilogy from the 90s. Um, but the big set pieces, the pans across alien worlds or space or desert, have this thunderous, epic music, grand and grandiose, worth going to the films for. Is that cinematography? Maybe not, but it seemed they planned the pans for this effect. I don't know anything about it. Each world is distinct. It's fully realized. Caladan is wet, green, foggy like Ireland. The 84 movie uses Baroque architecture and scrollwork to signify age. On Caladan, we have a royal cemetery that extends for hundreds of yards. The implication is strong. House Atreides is ancient and has always been on this ground. An aerial overflight of the desert conveys heat, um, desolation, loneliness. The characters mention the heat more than once. No one ever actually seems hot. So I don't know. Maybe they learned from the Lynch movie where actors actually collapsed from heat on those sets. Gidi Prime, maybe the least detailed place. Does it need to be bigger? If it does, I assume they'll wrap around to it later. We didn't spend much time there. One of the photos in the dump today was Fade Routha with a dagger in each hand, and there's a slit of a door that's about to open in front of him. And I would bet you $5 that that's going into an arena on Gidi Prime, which is a scene in the novel. It didn't make it into the Lynch adaptation. I don't. The miniseries was so forgettable. I watched the first one, and I don't know if that was in there. So yeah, as the Harkonnens and Gidi Prime are more important, maybe we'll see more of that setting. The colors are good. The palette tells story. The costumes are fine. Again, not my choices, but fine. Yeah, it looks like a world that people live inside. And what do I know? Um, the plot and the story. This is a 2.5 hour movie that introduces the main conflicts of the novel. Gets between a third and a halfway through that story. A lot is surrendered or done as implications. Yui's arc. It's there, but it's brief and it's more implied than told. Gurney and Jessica don't have a thing, and Jessica and Thufir don't, and Idaho doesn't give the game away to her in a fit of unexpected drunkenness because off-worlders are naive about spice beer. All of that is gone. They had to pick and choose and adapt, right? And drill down on specific stuff. The central Bene Gesserit mission is outlined really clearly because otherwise the Kwisatz Haderach makes no sense in the film. The Canley is gone. The generations long blood feud between the Harkonnens and the Atreides. The conflict still works as it is. It never maybe needed that depth, but works in the novel. The story's much tighter. It has to be. This is a movie. Dune is unfilmable. That's what adaptation is for, to tell a filmable story. Movies aren't books, and books aren't movie. So, to sort of conclude this 2 year old review, uh, this was everything it needed to be. It was an epic spectacle. It avoided fan service. It avoided the mistakes of other adaptations. Has a clear, cohesive vision. It's well adapted. The actors are good. The acting is good. Ben Clementine is just a gorgeous, gorgeous man. Um, I saw this with Mrs. Me, and she hated the novels. She like could not get past 50 pages into the first one. She hated it. She hated the miniseries. She hated the David Lynch version. It was just silly and weird. She loved this movie. Right? We came home and watched it again on cable. So, I mean, that should tell you a lot of what you need to know. Uh, there it is, Dune, part one. Okay, bye.